The LG V20 is easily one of the best used mobile device values of the year, so it should come as no surprise that the full review is, of course, scheduled for upload to the channel this fall. But because getting the most out of the device does involve unlocking the bootloader and installing a third-party ROM and custom kernel, I thought I'd take this time to set the table by at least going over what all is involved so that viewers can know how to get the most out of their devices ahead of time, since it seems like all of the guides that exist on this procedure are either incomplete or poorly written and just generally difficult to follow. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the procedure for unlocking the bootloader and installing custom ROMs on the VS995 Verizon wireless variant of the LG V20. Let's take a look.
I'll pick this up and check this out.
To be clear, this will also work on the US996 models of the V20, but since most of those can actually have their bootloaders unlocked officially without this kind of back-channel exploit method, it's not typically necessary. LG in 2016 was one of the last holdouts of what we refer to as the bad old days of Android, where there was a different version of any given phone for every single carrier, each of which supports only the wireless bands of its respective networks. So if you're shopping for a V20, here's a quick chart before we get started of what model supports what, so you know what not to buy. With that out of the way, I usually like to provide a general overview of the process so that what we're doing can make more sense during each step. In part 1, I'll use LG's official software update tool to downgrade to an earlier version of the stock ROM that will actually support the exploit. In part 2, I'm actually going to perform the DirtySanta exploit itself with the help of a Windows computer, although this can be done under other operating systems. In part 3, we're going to install the patched boot image along with a temporary recovery environment. And finally, in part 4, I'll load the correct version of the recovery environment and actually install the ROM and kernel. To perform the procedure, I'll be using a standard USB cable along with the requisite drivers and software, which I've uploaded off-site and linked to in the video description. A micro SD card or some type of external storage device will also be strongly recommended for step 4. Let's get started. Most guides referencing the Verizon V20 will downgrade to one of the earlier Verizon stock ROMs, which does work. I actually like to go at it a little bit differently though, because the Verizon stock software doesn't have a proper fast boot environment and will vibrate non-stop during that step, which doesn't really hurt anything, but certainly makes the process more stressful. As a result, I like to downgrade to the Exploitable Stock Rom for the US996 model, which is mostly identical anyway. It doesn't take any more time than the alternative, and it'll make the process far less intimidating. Once I've got the drivers and the patched version of LGUP installed, we're ready to get started. To enter download mode on the V20, while the device is powered off, hold the volume up key while connecting the USB cable. Once the V20 is mounted on the computer successfully, LGUP is going to try to save me from myself because it recognizes that I'm trying to install US996 software on a VS995 phone. To bypass that, I'm going to use the partition DL feature of the program to force it to ignore this check. Doing so usually takes a bit, but should finish with no further intervention required. After it's done, I go through the first run setup wizard and then perform a hard reset so that we don't have to fight with force close messages. Once that's done, it's time to get serious and move on to step 2. This is where things can get a little bit tricky, but it's easy enough as long as everything mounts as expected and, most importantly, the directions are followed. Before starting with the actual exploit, two things need to be done on the device. The first is to enable USB debugging, which can be done under developer options in the settings, and the second is to install a terminal emulator, because there are a couple of commands that get run on the device in addition to the ones that I'm inputting on the computer. Some of the steps run in parallel with one another, so I'll have a few different Windows command prompt windows open at the same time. The command context can be moved to the folder with all the scripts in it under Windows, either by using the CD command or by right-clicking the folder while holding down the Shift key and selecting Open Command Window here from the context menu. The first batch script to run is the runmefirst batch. In another window, I'm running the Step 1 batch script. With both of those visible, it's time now to run the two commands on the device itself. The first is ID. What I'm looking for is that untrusted_app verbiage. Once it's been seen, then I'm going to run this command. If that worked right, the runmefirst script should now be telling us to run the Step 2 batch. Step 2 is going to do a lot of stuff all at once, but once it's finished, it should automatically reboot the device into fast boot mode, and if all three scripts are finished and the device is on this screen, then we're clear to move on to the final part of the exploit. As long as it's not showing any caution and warning here in the device manager, we are clear to start Step 3. At this juncture, the video really speaks for itself. I'm keeping an eye on each of these things that it's doing to make sure that none of them are failing. Now, I dislike this script because it automatically restarts the device after all of that has been done, but it's not going to boot up completely anymore at this point. Thankfully, it does still get far enough to accept ADB commands, so we should be able to run ADB reboot bootloader to bring it back to fast boot without having to pull the battery. Now we're nearing the home stretch. There are 3 fast boot flash commands left to run. Do them one at a time to ensure success. Now, because there's no fast boot command to get us back to recovery mode, we're going to have to brace for the key combination here. As soon as the fast boot reboot has been run and the device dismounts, immediately start holding down volume, down, and power. Once the LG emblem appears, it is typically necessary to let go of the power button for around half a second, and then go back to holding it down until the device prompts for a hard reset, at which point we can let go of both keys and proceed forward with that reset. After doing the hard reset, there will be about 75 seconds of uncertainty, after which it'll get us back into a basic TWRP recovery environment. The reason why either a micro SD card or some type of external storage such as a flash drive is recommended for this step is because of the hard reset that we just performed. There may very well be a way around this, such as by mounting the device's built-in storage from within the recovery environment after the wipe has occurred, but doing it this way just makes life a lot easier. The first thing we'll do to ensure that all of our installs go smoothly going forward is to load up a special patched version of TWRP Recovery that is known to have the best compatibility with ROMs and stuff on this model of phone. To do that, I'm first mounting the micro SD card where I have the IMG file saved, toggling the option on the flashing screen to let me choose an IMG file instead of a zip, and then installing it. Rebooting to recovery now shows that I'm on version 3.2.3-4, confirming that it was a success. To actually be able to install ROMs and stuff, there is one last task that I need to perform, and that is to format the data partition. Because the stock ROM was encrypted, TWRP will not let me do a normal wipe and will in fact refuse to interact with any of that stuff until the format has actually been finished. With that done, the wipe will proceed forward without errors. I'll reboot back to recovery once more. And the ROM flash should complete successfully. I've selected a good baseline of parameters here for the install, but some of those things do come down to user preference. So at the end of the day, it is up to the person doing the installation. After it's done, I'm going to install the MK2000 kernel right away, since I picked the stock kernel in the ROM installer, which doesn't work well with the custom ROMs for best results. Unfortunately, because this combination overwrote some of the VS995 stuff that we installed earlier, the phone will vibrate uncontrollably until the first time when the software requests to toggle the vibration feature. Because the first boot takes a while, it'll be nearly 2.5 minutes before I can make it stop. I know that use of the software navigation keys delivers a short vibration effect, so I'm going to try to trigger one of them as soon as humanly possible. At long last, it's finally finished, and the device is ready to proceed. Keep in mind that the MK2000 kernel does not support encryption, so any application or security policy that requires it will scold you. Also, the device probably won't pass safety net anymore, so Google Pay is not going to work. Now, with that said, don't forget to install Magisk and the FM radio patch, both using TWRP, and then install this little utility from within Android to fix the display calibration and help reduce image retention all at the same time. The last thing that I like to do is to install one of these governor tweak packages to allow the device to retain full performance while recharging its battery. Also, if you find that the light sensor is kind of weak in the twilight, the exposed framework, and most specifically the iPreserver 2 module, can help accommodate for that, but sometimes it actually does so to the opposite extreme, so as with anything, your mileage may vary. Apart from that, the only other thing that remains to be fixed is that of the night mode functionality. Since the scheduler on LG's built-in software flat out just doesn't work, I like to use CF Lumen to tint the screen orange as it gets to be later in the day. Stay tuned for the full review and take a look at the video description for all downloads, links, and software recommendations. As always, thanks for watching.